These are the stories we share around the dinner table, tell in front of the campfire, and listen to on our porch. This is a place where tales are told and stories are heard. Grab your tea, your cocoa, your whiskey, your wine. Welcome to the Storyteller's Porch with your host, Jill Davis.
Welcome to the Storyteller's Porch podcast. Toni, I'm so glad you're here. I have today on our porch, Toni Gierhart. Toni is a woman in long-time recovery, a wife, a mom, a grandma, and a dog lover, and my friend. And Toni, I am so glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Jill. I'm glad to be here.
And Toni, one of my favorite parts of this season of the podcast, and I know it'll change because podcasts for me are going to be a flowing experience, but my favorite part right now is that I've been able to choose specific people in my life that I know have an amazing story to tell. I might be taking the easy way out because it makes my life easier as the host. And Toni, we've known each other. I was thinking it's got to be at least 15 years. Has it been that long or a little bit less than that, but around 15 years, right?
Yep, around 15 years. Yep.
Do you remember how we met? Because I remember it vividly.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you remember, and then I'll share what I remember?
Yeah. So I was working at the Clarion Hotel on downtown Colorado Springs. You and your sister were doing a Mary Kay convention in the hotel. And you and I had started chatting about Mary Kay. And you had asked me if I wanted to have a party. And I remember looking at you and kind of a little embarrassed said, well, I live in a house full of women because I live in sober living. And I just remember you looking at me with tears in your eyes and said, oh my gosh, I have a son in active addiction. And we just clicked from there on out.
I remember doing the party at your house. And for some of my listeners who don't know this about me, I am a retired Mary Kay sales director, and I did earn several of those cars. But Mary Kay for me was a way of connecting with people. And we connected beautifully in a world that may not seem like a place to connect with a recovering drug addict and a Mary Kay sales director. I'm sure I had on a fancy dress and high heels, which I never wear anymore. But I know I did back then. And it did. We just clicked and our lives have been intertwined ever since. So I'm just really glad you've chosen to join us on the porch today. And as you know, I spent a lot of time in the South, and so we never come to the porch without a drink. What is your drink today, Toni?
I'm drinking sweet tea.
Well, you're a good Southern girl, even though I don't think that's where you're from. Good job. In the South, sweet tea and unsweet is definitely a conversation. So I'm glad you're here. And we have a conversation today about your life. And I know you have been through some ups and downs and some adventures, and life is an interesting place to be. So, Toni, will you share your story with us here on the porch today?
I would be glad to. Thanks, Jill. Mommy, I love you. It's a simple phrase that moms hear every day from their children. They hear it in so many ways and so many times that sometimes we can forget how precious those words are. I had longed for 3 years to hear those words. Mommy, I love you. I was introduced to drugs when I was 19 years old. I had lost my mom to cancer when I was 18. My dad and I had a very estranged relationship. He blamed me for the death of my mom. I was partying one night. My boyfriend at the time brought some meth to the party, and I decided to try it. I honestly can't say if I was addicted from the first time, as I had bouts of sobriety from 1997 to 2006. What I can say is that over time, my addiction grew and changed from only using when partying to using every day to do basic life functions. When I started using, it was thrilling. It was a new experience because no drugs were legal then, including marijuana. It took several years, but eventually I lost everything, including my children, and almost losing my life to my addiction. In January of 2005, I was at home when the police and DHS showed up at my door as they had several times before. I was running with a very rough crowd at the time, and in the small town I was in, it wasn't a matter of if you got busted, but more of a when you got busted. The police had been watching me for some time. This time they left with my children and didn't bring them back. I continued in the addiction phase of my life, and as I spiraled out of control, I lost custody of 2 of my 3 children. My middle son, Timothy, was sent to live with his dad in North Carolina. My daughter went into foster care and eventually was adopted. My youngest son went to live with his grandma and grandpa, and they ended up adopting him. A little over a year later, on April 4th, 2006, I ended up in county jail, broken and beaten from life on the streets. I was depleted. I had no fight left in me. I was headed to prison, and I was actually okay with that. I was just worn out and had accepted what my life had become. Jail for normal people is terrifying. The thought of being locked up without the ability to continue their life is enough to keep most out of jail. For me, I was relieved. Something inside me knew this time was different. I could finally stop living the way I was living. I knew I had made mistakes, and I was ready to pay my penance. In 2006, I was sentenced to 6.5 years in the Department of Corrections. Ironically, this was also my middle son Timothy's birthday. I finally had a plan for my life, and for the first time in a long time, I was okay. In early 2007, I was in a halfway house, going through rehab and starting to rebuild my life. My jail time was over, and I still had that feeling of life being okay. I had learned that taking life one day at a time could really make a difference. One weekend, on a random call to my dad, he surprised me and gave me a phone number that I could use to call my son Timothy. He was living with my former sister-in-law, and she was going to allow me to talk to him. The next 3 days were spent nervous, scared, and excited. I would have the opportunity to speak to him, but it took a bit to work up the nerve to call, and when I finally did, I was shaking as I held the phone and trying to hold back the tears. And then on the phone was my son saying, "Mommy, I love you." These were the first words that I had heard from him in 3 years. "Mommy, I love you." That day going forward, I vowed to be the mom he deserved. I completed the program at the halfway house and moved into sober living. I lived in sober living for 9 months. I discovered that my former husband never filed to terminate my parenting rights. With this knowledge, I made the decision that I would do whatever it took to bring him home to live with me. I secured a stable job, I rented a 2-bedroom apartment, and started filling it with everything a boy of 8 would love. His room was filled with toys and his own bed, his own TV, with a gaming system and a closet full of clothes. The only thing missing was him. In 2008, I was on my way to Little Caesars Pizza to get dinner when my former sister-in-law called me and informed me that Timothy's dad had an altercation at Timothy's school while Timothy was present and watched. The school had called DHS, and they were having a hearing the next day to determine a safe place for my son to live. They believed that his current situation was not good. Her exact words to me were, "If you want your son, now is your chance." It was meant to be. I had just gotten paid and had the following 2 days off from work. I was filled with emotion. I was happy, crying, scared, and ready all at the same time. It was the day I had been longing and hoping and praying for. In the previous few months, I had collected all my urinalysis test results. I had compiled character reference letters from people in the community. I had pictures of my son's room and everything in it. I felt confident and strong in the mom I had become. I had a 5.5-hour drive ahead of me. I left after 5 p.m., which meant I pulled into the town my son lived late that night. I stayed with a friend and showed up at the school first thing the next morning. I was so nervous walking in the door of that school. I walked into the school my children attended when I lost them. I walked in with my head high and walked straight up to the receptionist. She recognized me. Before she even greeted me, she picked up the phone and called the police department. She informed them I was there and asked if I had any warrants. I don't think she had a lot of trust in me. I just put all my paperwork on her desk. I looked her right in the eyes and said, "I am not that person today." I met with the leaders of the school, the members of DHS, and I explained my situation to them. And for the first time, I told all of them, I will be an addict until the day I die. The difference today is I choose not to live there. About that time, Timothy's dad walked into the room. He knew why I was there. They left us alone to talk about what was best for Timothy. And at the end of the conversation, we decided Timothy was better off with me. I walked out of that room feeling elated and proud of what I had accomplished. Just then, Timothy came running around the corner and jumped in my arms. We went to where he was staying and packed up his things. They all fit in an army footlocker. We began the journey of our lives. That journey continues today. Timothy is now 20 years old. He has a daughter of his own and still lives at home with me. I just celebrated 15 years of being clean and sober. I am forever grateful for the opportunity to be his mom, the mom that he deserves. I am not perfect and don't ever want to be. I just want to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. I now hear the words, "Mommy, I love you," every day, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Toni, thank you so much for sharing that story. That's such a heart story. And I know that as I listen to you, there's so much more to it and so much before and after and in between. And thank you for letting us see a little bit into your life, because that's what the porch is all about, is sharing those stories. As I listened to you, a couple of things really stood out to me is that you were okay with going to jail. I mean, that's such a concept, to be okay with it. Can you tell me a little bit about how you felt that day? Like, did you just feel like, thank God somebody else is in charge now? Or tell me a little bit about it.
I was so tired of living the way I was living. I was technically homeless. I was scraping by every day. Most days I woke up hoping to die. That was where I was at. And ended up in the back of the police car that day. It was such a relief to not have to struggle anymore.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And, we were just talking before we started recording today, Toni, about life. And, the last year we are currently recording in June of 2021. So COVID's starting to go away a little bit. We're all peeking our noses out. In Colorado, where if you have the vaccine, you don't have to wear a mask, things like that. And I think that this last year wore out a lot of us in so many ways. We just got worn out. And I know as I talked to people over the last year and over the last several months, as we have been recording, one of the things that people have lost is hope. And so in an odd way, it sounds like the jail time actually gave you some hope. And I know that's one of your favorite quotes. Do you mind sharing that quote with us, Toni?
Sure. It's a quote by Christopher Reeve, and it says, "Once you choose hope, anything is possible."
And I just think it's so powerful to see you chose hope then, you choose hope now. And we as a collective can continue to choose hope. And that takes me to my last question here, Toni, on the porch. The stories that we share here on the porch are personal and they have collective impact. So if you could wave that proverbial magic wand I like to give away and have it create the exact collective impact that you would wish, what would that be?
That if anybody is struggling, that there's hope. There's always hope.
There's always hope. I think that one is one that I could make like into a quote card or something. What do they say? Quote memes. There is always hope by Toni Gierhart. And that is what your story brings to us today, Toni. And it's a beautiful story. Thank you for being so brave and willing to share with us. You can find more about Toni on our website. And thank you for coming today, Toni. Enjoy your sweet tea. I'll be enjoying my coffee.
Thanks, Jill.
Here at the Storyteller's Porch, we believe we are the stories we share. Keep living your story and meet us next time here on the porch. And be sure to bring your favorite drink. And remember, there is always hope.
To learn more about our storytellers and our host, Jill Davis, you can find their bios and their social media links at thestorytellersporch.com. To make sure you hear every story with us on the porch, follow us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and wherever you hear your favorite shows. We'll see you next time here on the porch, where I'll be drinking some iced coffee and cream. What drink will you bring?